I also don't self-identify as a millennial. I'm not sure if I statistically identify as a millennial because I'm born in 1978, which makes me a very old millennial or a very young member of Generation X. I'm kind of fall into the middle, the crack in between. But when I think about the questions posed by these gatherings in the survey, my own work deals a lot with history, not with the future. And I wrote a book about Harlem, which is a place that holds a very powerful resonance in American history and really around the world. It's also a place that's changing a lot right now because of overdevelopment, both in the sort of a collusion of private sector and city government striving to transform the neighborhood. So when I talked about that book a lot in the last year and a half, people always want to ask me, what is Harlem going to be like 25 years from now? I was like, don't you understand? I'm not a futurist. I'm a person that looks back, mostly. But in doing so, there's always a lot to learn. And in my own experience and sort of spending my time looking back and really looking at history in order to have an understanding of what's happening among us right now, I find, for instance, in the history of Harlem, the question of development and overdevelopment was really a seed that was planted 50 years ago. And so the issues that started to surface in the late 80s, even through the 90s into 2000s when I was living there, you could go back into the archives and find a news write-up of a meeting, a public hearing that had happened in 1957 or so, which could have been written in 2007. So I find that there's always a connection to be made between what's happened before and what's about to happen. And we're really just sort of watching those seeds sprout. And so in a way, just because of my own disposition, I resist the idea that there's something specific about right now to focus on, and would encourage people of our age, our generation, to continually make that glance backwards. Because even though we can take a survey of 2,000 people who are about the same age, we live in communities. We don't, even though college campuses sort of artificially create communities that are homogenous in terms of age, when you go home, whether you go home within this city, if you live in this city, or if you go home during your breaks, you live among people of different ages, and they have things to tell you, the people who are older. The people who are younger are looking at you. And I find that that's a much more dynamic way of thinking about these questions of the future, right? Because as the survey showed, there's so many people of this generation who are living at home with their parents. That intergenerational aspect is even more sort of important at this moment than it maybe has been in others. So that's something that I just wanted to bring into the room, that as much as it's sort of, especially in an election cycle, this sort of push to be very zeitgeisty and like, what are the young people doing? Like I was 18 during the Rock the Vote, the first Rock the Vote campaign, I think, when Clinton was returned to office. And that sort of furor just happens every 4 years, doesn't it, after all? Where we want to know, like, what are the young people thinking? And in 4 years, the young people aren't necessarily the same young people anymore. The same questions get posed. And I'm not sure that there's a big shift from every 4 years to what's happening. And I'd be interested in hearing the college students now talk about their own experiences of themselves within their communities, their broader communities, not just thinking of themselves within this sort of semi-artificial generational question.